Hi there, you're listening to the Guitar Speak podcast. My name is Matt Wakeling, and thank you so much for joining me again. Hey, here we are with part 2 of our interview with David Moyse. And hey, thanks for all the great response to part 1 of this interview. There were some really cool messages, people who really enjoyed that. Hearing about Dave's story, his time with Air Supply, touring the world, hooking up with Ibanez guitars, all that kind of stuff. Now, if you haven't heard part 1, you can get that from guitarspeakpodcast.libsyn.com, or if you haven't already, subscribed to us on iTunes. That's really easy to do, or look us up on Stitcher. There's lots of ways to listen to the Guitar Speak podcast. All right, part 2 of our interview with Dave. We pretty much pick up from where we left off. Dave and most of the band, most of the Air Supply backing band, have been dumped from their gig fairly unceremoniously. If you want to learn how not to fire your band, listen to episode 1. Anyway, we pick up from there. So Dave got involved in the Sydney session scene, played on some really big film soundtracks, amongst other sessions, lots of commercials and various things. We also talk about Dave's involvement with Hillsong music and the albums he played on, the tours he did, and just being part of that worship team. And really central to all that is Dave's Christian faith, which he does talk about as well in this episode. There's production credits for Dave. There's some albums I worked with David on, which was awesome. Such a privilege to be involved. We talk about that. Dave's solo career, he's writing some of his own stuff. We get a sneak peek of one of his tracks, which is cool. David also mentions a left hand injury. Now, a hand injury for any musician is pretty serious stuff. We spoke more about this off air, but he does mention that, and basically his left hand, he can't play for a long time. He can still play and do the stuff, but he's just managing that at the moment and getting various treatments. So far so good, and we wish Dave all the best with that, of course. All right, so let's move on to the interview with David Moyse. I started off part 2 by asking him what was next after the Air Supply days. So what did you move on to then? So what was the next thing for you?
Well, from then I have to give my testimony, mate. I have to tell what happened.
Yeah.
About the whole Christian thing. And whether I don't know how much of this you want to publish, but I'll give it to you, and you can do what you want with it.
Sure.
Because on the road, in brief anyway, as briefly as I can. Mm-hmm. On the road, I don't know. I think most musicians are spiritual in some way. They've got, there's an aspect about music that touches the soul. Mm-hmm. I was curious about this guy called Jesus. I never really had a Christian upbringing, but I was curious about him. And my dear old mum, who was a Christian, or is a Christian, all through those years, would always say, if you get in trouble, just ask Jesus to help you out. Uh-huh. And he will. And I'd placate her and say, yeah, thanks, Ma. But I think not long before, so this would have been 82, end of the 82 tour, which mm-hmm. was only supposed to be 3 months, went on to be 8 months. I got to a point, we were being in litigation because we'd sued our Australian management and countersued and blah, blah, blah. And I found myself in New Orleans, really on my bed, quite alone, really wanting to know, if this Jesus person was who he said he was. So I really basically just put it out there. I said, look, if you really are who you are, you know where I'm at right now. And with every fibre of my being, I asked him to take charge of my life. And there were no hallelujah choruses. So nothing really changed, except when we did finally come back, I found myself in a service in the Sydney Town Hall. You know the story already, Matt.
Yeah.
And my life forever changed when I accepted God's call to receive his son, Jesus.
Right.
So, and that's not religion. It is just a very, very personal revelation of God when your heart is opened up there. So musically, that led me into the whole gospel, worship kind of thing.
So you were living in Sydney by now, back in Sydney?
Still back in Sydney, yeah. But I was doing a lot of session work as well. Mm-hmm. So I guess post Air Supply, my focus was pretty much sessions, doing film scores and playing on film scores and the Crocodile Dundee 1 and 2, and various television plays, Harp in the South.
Wow.
Strictly Ballroom. Just pretty much anything. Commercials forever, obviously.
Okay.
Playing on. It was kind of like the clean team during the air supply days in Sydney was pretty much Ralph, myself, Dave Green, the bass player.
Yeah.
And Rex and Frank Esther Smith. So we pretty much do everything.
Okay.
Back in those days.
Wow, that's cool. Very cool.
I
was talking to Peter Northcott a while back. He was probably starting to come up and do sessions perhaps around then too.
Well, it's very interesting you mentioned Peter.
Yeah.
Peter is a phenomenal player. You're right. He was just this young guy, just kind of starting out. He was doing a few club gigs here and there. I got to the stage where, because of the development and growth in my own personal life, particularly spiritually, and my involvement with church music, I got to the point where I just didn't want to do sessions and particularly live gigs. I didn't want to do live gigs anymore.
Yeah.
Play the pubs and stuff. So I had a whole heap of stuff going on that I rang up Peter and gave to Peter.
Okay.
So, not that I am not that I'm the cause of his growth as a musician, but it certainly gave him a whole bunch of stuff that he probably didn't otherwise have.
Yeah, right.
And he's just gone from strength to strength.
Yeah.
What I love about Peter, apart from the fact that he's a fun guy and a great musician, he is probably the only guy. Rex is a little bit this way, but Peter really took being a session player and made it a business. This is my business. And he treated it super professionally.
Yeah.
And he just didn't, not in any area did he compromise in his professionalism. Many guitar players would rock up and it was kind of, the old boys' time, and we'd set up and play and have a good time. But Peter would always rock up with everything you'd possibly need for a session. His guitar's in perfect order, and he would also put on a show. Like he'd get up and play the guitar like a rock god in the studio. So I have huge respect for Peter. He's a terrific player and a great guy, and got a really good head on his shoulders.
That's cool. And he definitely acknowledges there were a lot of guys around that time who were like Tommy Emmanuel and Jim Kelly, who really encouraged him along as well as yourself did. So cool. Jim was probably another one of those guys that really hammered home this juxtaposed phrase to relax. He would always say, man, just relax, just relax, man. Don't allow yourself to get tense. Just be still and let things rise. He would always say that. And if you watch him play, that's the way he plays. Awesome.
He's a great technician and a musician. But when I listen to Jim play, I call him a lover. He's a lover. There's something about his playing that's really, really sweet.
That's cool. Nice. So, just to back up a little, so you're doing like film scores and things. Were you reading? Like, are you a great reader?
I wouldn't say I was a great reader. I wasn't a great reader.
But is that the expectation on the gig though? You get a page of dots and you're working your way through.
Yeah, look. Yeah, it depends on the gig and depends on the producer / composer. If you're working for someone like Ashley Irwin, everything's written out. And Ashley was living in Sydney at the time. He's now over in LA doing all kinds of movies. He does the Academy Awards and all sorts of things. But Ashley would write everything out. Pretty much. Like I had to play bouzouki on a whole bunch of, pretty much every day for about 3 months.
Wow.
On this television series we were doing. I can't remember what it was. So first of all, I had to learn how to play bouzouki, and then I had to translate the dots on the bouzouki. So, yeah, sometimes you're called to do things that you're not used to doing.
Yeah.
So you've kind of got to go home and do some homework,
Yeah.
Which
That's
I guess
cool.
is obvious, but
Sure.
yeah. And then there's Peter Best, who did all the Crocodile Dundee stuff. His stuff was a little looser. If there were particular notes he wanted to hear, he'd definitely write it down.
Okay.
But his scores were always very simple. His way of writing was entirely different to Ashley. Ashley would have notes flying everywhere, and big orchestral stuff, or quite complex timing things.
Yeah.
Which often happens in movies anyway. Peter would, if you listen to the score on Crocodile Dundee and pretty much anything else he's done, it's kind of underscore and moody and just good grooves and sounds and tones and things that work with the picture. Quite a different sort of writer.
Okay.
So, writing wise, there wasn't not a lot of dots with Peter. With Ashley, yes.
So were you like watching any visual cues, or were you just recording ideas and then the
More often
producers
than
arranging?
not, no. More often than not, you're playing to picture. So,
Okay.
and which is a fairly important thing to do in film scoring, because you've got the music there, but you really need to. The instrumentalist needs to understand what's going on visually, because it makes you play differently. You'll play the same notes, but you'll have a different intent. You'll play to the visual, which kind of goes hand in hand with what we were talking about in the beginning. You've got to have a desire to want to move, to emote the heart of the listener, and the only way you can do that is from your own heart. So when you're seeing a picture and you're playing a piece of music, that picture is going to affect you.
Yeah.
Those visuals are going to emotionally affect you, and hence what you play will have a different outcome, have a different sense. So yeah, always playing the visuals.
Yeah, right.
Very rarely not.
Wow, that's cool. That must have been an exciting time.
Yeah, it's terrific. I mean, and the thing, if you translate that to a band,
Yep.
for anybody that's in the band listening, don't play to yourselves. How many bands just sit in and play to themselves, man? I mean, it's horrible for the people out there. They pay good money to come and see you, and they want to be moved. They want to have a good time. So every single band member, whether from the drummer, bass player, guitar player, keyboard player, should be facing out and be totally focused on your audience.
Yeah.
You've heard me say that 1,000 times, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah.
In years past, and just give out to your people, and be right up front of stage and engage your people, because as you look out over your audience, that actually makes you play different. Because you're trying to speak to their heart, so to speak,
sure.
without getting too weird.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, you mentioned church music, and this is where you and I met. Like you, I was not brought up in the church, but it was 1986. I started going to church with some mates, and that had a huge impact on my life as well. And it must have been the early 90s when I met you at Hillsong, when you started attending there and joined the music
That's
team.
right. Yeah.
And that was awesome for me. It was such a there was a handful of guys, and you were definitely one of them, who really mentored me, and I just learnt a lot just by hanging around you, and to get to play with you was awesome. I was petrified at first.
Buddy.
Here's the air supply guy, and but I realized very quickly you were just a great guy and a wonderful guitar player, and like the rest of us, just mad about making music and stuff.
Absolutely.
What
Yeah.
So in those days of Hillsong, I think you would have played on some of the first albums. There'd been some albums previous, but you played on some of the first albums, which seemed to make again an impact in America, and you found yourself touring
Yeah.
America, doing very different
Yeah.
gigs than the Air
Very
Supply
different
ones.
gig. Yeah.
But playing, touring, doing church services and meetings and
Yeah.
things. What were those days like?
Uh, yeah, wonderful. Look, it's a funny thing because, yeah, look, when I first came to Hillsong, I came from Brian's father's church initially. That's where I first came to know the Lord,
Yeah.
and moved across to Castle Hill. Musically, it was, well, weekend warriors,
Yeah, yeah.
people having a go on the weekend. And so, yeah, I guess a lot of my role initially, this is just a preamble to your question, a lot of my role was I felt anyway, was to more than tell people stuff, just to be. And like you just mentioned, you just by watching, how I went about doing what I did, people picked up a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
And then, of
definitely.
course, there are times when you actually do talk about groove, and we take the time out to try and grow
Yeah,
skill sets,
yeah.
But it's more about like rocking up on time, making sure your gear has actually got fresh strings. I
Yeah.
mean, making sure your guitar neck's set up correctly.
Hmm.
Drum skins. If they're worn out, man, change them.
Yeah.
All this kind of stuff of really starting to think about your instrument as an extension of your own heart and your
Hmm.
own voice. And I think that brought a lot of change, which translated into a different sound, and a sound that almost certainly had influences, from my time with Air Supply, no doubt.
Hmm.
But then other people take it up and bring what they bring.
Yeah, sure.
So the touring side, very different. What was quite funny though is when we go to these tours, and they were quite large tours,
Yeah.
because much like Air Supply, it was fairly quick with Hillsong. I think Darlene's song "Shout to the Lord" is the one would have been Hillsong's "Lost in Love."
Okay. I
Uh,
know what you mean, though. Yeah, really, a lot of people caught onto that song and it had a huge impact. So this is around 93, 94, I think.
I think so. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We didn't really start doing major touring till I think '96. I think it was something
Okay.
like that.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, look, it was, for me personally, it was fantastic because now I had an opportunity to kind of bring whatever it is that musically I have to bring, to worship God. And that's kind of what music's primarily about for me these days. It doesn't mean I'm just playing worship type music. It doesn't really matter what I do, whether I'm playing on a pop album or whatever.
Hmm.
It's really about making sure that the production, the guitar playing, the sound, it's got to move a heart, man. It's got to, when you hear it, you got to go, wow, that's really, it moves you. What was funny about those tours is I'd have fans, of Air Supply that would used to come to my old concerts, would come up and, they were either Christians back then or had become Christians,
Right.
coming up saying, "Oh, wow, man, how cool! Good to see you, and it's so great." And it's quite funny.
Our friend Peter King, who's now in Nashville, he played keyboard on some of those Hillsong tours, and he would say you were always the last guy on to get in the bus or whatever.
I was always what?
The last guy to get on the
Last.
bus. Yeah, the last one,
Oh,
because
okay.
half the crowd, had met you previously, and you had all these friends all around America that wanted to say g'day and catch up.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, everywhere we went, there were people that knew me and wanted to catch up and say hi. And it was it was great actually. It was really really great because you're going back from a different place.
Hmm.
Um, a lot of fun.
You ended up doing some production work, and this is
Yeah,
this is as I mentioned before. I ended up playing on a couple of albums, some of the Youth Alive albums that you produced, and Oh man, I know, and I tell everyone this. You worked us so hard. Simon Ruffalo, the other guitar player, and I, we often
Uh,
talk about this with affection.
I hope
But
so.
you worked us so hard, but it was so good, and we really grew as guitar players. I remember, I'll never forget this. Like you talk about relaxing and having soft hands. I remember I was doing an overdub in your home studio. It was on I don't remember the song, but it was on an acoustic guitar, and it was just some simple, really strumming pattern. But like I don't know, like a lot of musicians, if I got more intense, I would rush. My timing would
Yeah.
be poor, and getting bigger meant going faster, which is not always the best idea. But I remember this once, it just clicked. It was like a light bulb, and I finally felt what you were saying to me, and I just felt
Yeah.
myself just sit back in the seat a little more. My hands got a little softer, and I went, okay, that's what it's about. And so I always remember that. I mean, there was plenty of other things too, but I always remember that moment and just thinking, okay, this is what Dave's been telling me for the last 5 years that I've known him, and man, as guitar player, we just learnt so much about like you said, about tones, about looking after our guitars. There was one album I remember
That's,
you made sure in the budget we had our guitars set up by, I think it was Tom Doss who was doing your
yeah,
guitars at the
that's right,
time.
Tom. Yeah,
Yeah.
of course.
Oh man, I'd never had a fret job done before. I don't think.
That's that's right. You guys had these great gouges in your frets.
Oh,
That's
it
right.
was just, oh man. And then
Which of
yeah,
course you can't play in tune, man. It's impossible.
yeah, that's what we found out. So, so we thought, oh, this is why this is part of the budget. Great, great. So our guitars were like brand new. It felt like I had a brand new neck, and yeah, all that stuff. But yeah, man, I warmly remember those days.
Oh,
And as
that's
I said,
great.
and you were generous with your guitars. Simon, being a left-hander, we scoured some extra left-handed guitars, but I remember playing your artist, as we mentioned. The big
Mm.
thing for me was playing your Telecaster. You had like a natural finish telly. I don't know if it was like
That's
a
right.
reissue or something. And
Well, yeah, I think it was actually originally a cream telly that had been um, yeah, they'd taken it right back to bare wood to like Bruce Springsteen's then guitar,
yeah,
and
awesome.
yeah, yeah, it was
And that,
lovely. I've still got it.
yeah, cool. I remember playing that through a deluxe a lot of the time, and
Yeah, nice.
we just, you just got us to turn up or down the deluxe as much as we needed to make it sing, and that was fun, little Fender Deluxe. But there was a bunch of amps, yeah. So we learnt so much, and I learnt so much just sitting under your production, and yeah,
That's
that
great. Thanks, buddy. That's
man,
good.
we were making a
Yeah.
record, but it felt like we were going to guitar school. It was awesome.
And what's really satisfying, I mean, you're a teacher, so you know what I'm saying here. What's really satisfying is when you take that time out, and it might take a little while for it to sink in, but when it does,
Hmm.
and you see people, the lights go on. I mean, man, that's just
Yeah,
there's your payback right there.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so I mean, I find that even today, that brings me great joy when I sit down and have a chat to people, even if it's just over a cup of coffee, and you're talking about conceptual things that maybe people are not aware of, and then they get it, and it makes such a difference. And that's it's not that it doesn't puff you up; it actually just brings joy to know that somebody's actually found something new that they can move forward on. It's great
Yeah, definitely.
because that's how it happened for me. So you just pass it on.
Pass it on. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
And as you mentioned, yeah, teaching, that's the thing. And then later I became a music director in another church, and what am I doing? I'm just passing on the stuff I learnt from you and the guys.
and others. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so
No, it's terrific.
it's cool, hey?
Very cool. I must
Awesome.
say, my time with Tommy was also was very precious too.
Yeah, Tommy
Because
Emmanuel?
yeah, Tommy helped out on that very first album.
Hmm.
Um, because, like I mentioned, I was having a few challenges with my tone. And I think probably emotionally I was having a few problems because I think the pressure of it all kind of gets on top of you, you know.
Sure.
Tommy grew up in a musical family. For him at that time, and he's considerably, he's 10 years older than me, but he was always the king, and still is today, the king guy. He's the king.
Yeah.
So he came and did a few things. Robbie Porter was actually producing a couple of the songs, and he came up and did a few bits and pieces on some of the songs, and it was just great getting to meet him, getting to know him, and we went on to become really, really good friends and do a lot of recording together as the years went on. So yeah, it's good. Yeah,
it's awesome having those people. I spoke to Michael Fix. I don't know if you know Michael Fix. He's an acoustic player.
Yeah, I've met him a couple of times. We're not sort of close friends.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, he's great. He's up in Queensland now, but he's
he's an amazing player. Wow.
Yeah, and he spent a lot of time with Tommy Emmanuel when he moved up to Sydney, and he talks about the big brother idea. He says you need big brothers, and sounds like Tommy's been one to a few people, and it filters down. Yeah, so that's really cool. So what happened? So by the late 90s, you've sort of picked up with some of your American connections, and you're touring with different sort of gospel setups.
Well, Don Moen, who was at the time a part owner of Integrity, which was arguably the largest, certainly most prolific distributor of gospel music in the world, certainly in North America.
Yeah.
I think it was Shout to the Lord. I think that was the first album that Hillsong did with Integrity.
Okay. Yeah.
So they flew out, which is their custom, to be there for the recording. But during my time there, I got to meet Don, and we were texting each other on our Blackberries. You thought we were so high tech.
Yeah. Well, you were.
Anyway, he some weeks later, I sent him a text, just being very cheeky. I was really just having fun. I said, so I'll see you next week in Japan for your tour, just as a joke, you know. And he wrote back and said, okay, the tickets are on their way, and they were. So that's kind of how we got to get moving. And Don has always had the best players he can possibly have.
Yep.
So his standard band was my hero. They were my heroes as a teenager.
Yeah.
Abraham Laboriel.
Wow.
Not every tour, but on a number of them. Chester Thompson from Weather Report and Phil
Collins. Yeah.
Genesis. Yeah, Phil Collins. Shelia E from Prince.
Shelia E did those tours.
Yeah, she did percussion on percussion and played drums on some tracks as well.
Okay,
some things. Paul Jackson Jr. From Michael Jackson. Houston Mario, who is not so well known, but amongst musos, just an exceedingly well respected flautist and woodwind player. And we also had this guy, I can't remember his name. He was Korean American, who was Phil Collins's trumpet player. He would join us on occasion. But so that was the next 5 years in between doing Hillsong stuff. I'd go out on the road doing these tours through Asia with these players and recording live albums, studio albums, and the like. And it was fantastic. It's interesting. Just on a again, I probably told you this story before, but I'll mention it. On one of my tours with Air Supply, I went to a place called the Baked Potato in Los Angeles, which I think even to this day is still going. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
A favoured club for musos, and I was expecting to see Larry Carlton. He didn't rock up. A band called Quinonea rocked up.
Okay.
And
that was Abe Laboriel's band, hey?
Abe's band with Hadley Hawkins, Smith, Dean Parks.
Wow.
I can't remember their names. Billy Maxwell. these are all kind of king hit session players of the 70s and early 80s in Los Angeles. Anyway, he got up there and before he started, he sits up and he says, "Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for coming to the Baked Potato. We'd just like to thank our Lord Jesus Christ, our Savior, for this evening and hope you have a good time." And I'm thinking, what, you guys are Christians? You got to be joking, you know. So, yeah, that actually had quite an impact on me. So the first time I actually met Abe was over breakfast in some hotel in Seoul, Korea.
Wow.
And he had heard I was going to be joining the tour, but he didn't know that story. So we kind of I told him that story, and it was a bit of an emotional time for us both. So it was great because it just showed that what he, you know, him being himself really had an impact on me. So
fantastic. Yeah, he's amazing. If you ever see him play, he's just full of so much joy and musicianship, and he just rolls it all into this force. He's incredible. It must have been such an amazing time for you and all those other guys. Far out.
Yeah, and look, you know, I think they're a common denominator with them all outside of musicianship, but this is what I believe makes them such great musicians, is that they are humble, very, very disciplined. Absolutely. I mean, they know their craft very well, but they're just beautiful people. They're really lovely people.
Yeah.
And exceedingly intelligent. My goodness. What Abraham doesn't know is not worth talking about. It's amazing. Very well read.
Wow.
Speaks something like 6 different languages.
Oh, my goodness. He certainly speaks them on the bass as well, so that's cool.
Oh, he does, doesn't he? Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So fast forward a bit, you're now back in your home state of South Australia, and you were inducted into their Hall of Fame, or into their Music Hall of Fame last year. That must have been pretty cool.
Last November, yeah. Bit of a surprise. The guy who was I guess you call him the trustee or whatever you call of the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
A guy called Enrico Mick Morona, who's Kate Sabano's drummer for many years.
Okay.
Moved to London for 12 years, and his family are all here, being Italian. Adelaide's a big Italian city.
Yeah.
He moved back here, and Enrico is just one of these guys who's a natural-born promoter. And he'd been trying to contact me for probably close to 3 years, sending me emails. And it's just the way the way he contacted me. I thought it was some sort of bogus hack, you know. So I just blew it off every time until I got a phone call from Mark Meyer, the drummer from Moving Pictures, my old high school mate, saying, "Listen, Dave, what's the go, man? Enrico's trying to get a hold of you." I said, "Oh, sorry." He said, "Yeah, he wants to induct you into the Hall of Fame." So, yeah, that was a lot of fun. I was in good company that night too. I had Bill Chambers was inducted along with a luthier. I've forgotten his name.
Okay.
He's a guitar maker here in Adelaide. Been making classical guitars and some electric, but mainly very, very high-end classical guitars, I believe. For quite a few years. So yeah, it was a fun night. It was great.
Fantastic.
I had I put a band together and sang 3 Air Supplies, one of my own little songs, which I might give you to play to your audience.
Yeah, great.
And a song by a band called Mercy Me, which is called Beautiful. I even had my son Alexander in the band, which was awesome.
Great. What does he play?
He's a guitar player. Yeah,
Okay.
He's picking it up. He's starting
cool.
to pick it up. And an old friend of yours and mine from way back, Paul Yanizelli.
Oh, great. Fantastic.
Playing keys.
Oh, cool, man. That's great.
So it was a great little band.
I call you out, call you in, set you right. I cut the shoulder blade, walk in jail. Freedom you cry for comes your way. Only my arms can take your way. Seeing life lived fade away, I give you my name. I call you out, come away.
Yeah, well, congratulations. That's a huge honour, and I'm glad you finally returned the call or picked up the phone. And
I'm very honoured. We're in good company. I mean, there's Glenn Shorrock, B. Birtles, all those guys. They've been inducted recently. I think Doc Neeson and Chris Bailey from the Angels have just been inducted, and
of course, because they were Adelaide guys as well to start with.
Oh man, the
so
number
much
of people,
good music, yeah.
I think the number of amazing musicians and bands and writers that have come out of this town, and still, I mean, Orianthe, is that her name?
Okay, that's right. She's from Adelaide, yeah. Yeah, she's amazing.
Plays like crazy.
Yeah.
It's a great town. Come on down.
Awesome, man. You've got the you got the guitar festival too, don't you? Is there the South Australia Guitar Festival in August, September or something? That looks really cool. Fantastic. Hey, you mentioned off air and just alluded to it just then. You're doing some original stuff. You're writing your own stuff.
Yeah, it's something I've wanted to do for ages. And I figure if it's a little burst right at the end of my life, well, that's fine too. Mm-hmm. It's something I've wanted to do all my life, but somehow just for one reason or another, whether it be lack of self-confidence or whatever, I've just never kind of got around to it, which I think most people suffer from at various times. I'm writing, coming up with some interesting stuff. I have no desire to be the greatest next pop, sensation at 58. That's probably not likely. Or you never know.
Why not?
Might have some weird video clips to go with the music. Just writing some stuff, and what little I've played to audiences so far has been very well received. So
great.
We'll see what happens, mate.
That's cool.
We'll see what happens.
What kind of stylistic avenue are you exploring?
Very good question. I have quite an eclectic and broad taste. This first couple of songs, I don't know what you would call them, man. They're they've got a bit of a European sort of flavour, I guess, in a way. You just have to listen to them, and you give me your idea.
Okay, cool.
They're about songs. It's more about songs and what I would do to a song.
Yep.
So I'm doing to my own songs. So I'm actually singing.
Great.
So it's more for me these days. It's more about my voice than as a singer than being a guitar player. Just. Yeah,
right. That's cool. But knowing you, the guitar parts will be impeccable.
Well, they'll be. I expect they would be tasty and appropriate.
Yeah.
And maybe a little different to what you would expect, perhaps.
Ah, cool. I'm very curious to hear this stuff, Dave. That's awesome. That's so good. Excellent. You've got a gig in October? You actually
at the moment, I have a gig at the Wheat Chief pub here in Adelaide on the 14th of October. I haven't absolutely committed to that yet. I've told Enrico, who's actually booked the gig, that I am having a few challenges with my left hand, and but I'm going to have to give him a definitive in the next 3 weeks. So, So let's hope my hands come together.
Yeah, definitely.
The thing is, I can play. It's just I can't play for long.
Okay.
Without it hurting a lot. So,
sure. Yeah. Maybe you could. I don't mean to be flip about this, but maybe you could be like B.B. King and just sing and then just pull out Lucille for the solo.
Well, it's interesting you should say that, because at the induction, that's exactly what happened.
Ah, okay.
And that's without me even trying.
Yeah, right.
I had the songs really well put together. I made sure that the various players had got their parts together well. So I was pretty much free to to just jab and stab and interject and punctuate where I needed to.
Oh, cool.
And really, it was actually really all about the singing. So
yeah, right.
So that's kind of where I'm heading.
Okay.
Which means that I can still go ahead and record all the parts myself.
Yeah,
although
sure.
I'm actually really enjoying having other players come on board. Mm-hmm. It's because I can handpick who I want.
Yeah,
and
great.
If there's a player I know that has a certain flavour, a certain approach that I think would be good for a song, I can get them.
Ah, yeah.
And that's just a wonderful area I'm moving into now that I've never really kind of done for myself. Cool. It's always been for someone else. So
yeah.
It's bringing honestly, man, I've never been happier, never been more creative, never had more fun than I am now. So
brilliant. Yeah. Well, Dave, man, I've got to thank you so much. You've given us a lot of time and an amazing amount of stories. I didn't know half of this stuff, probably less. So, to be honest, yeah, we'll have to have you back again then. But
that's good,
mate, half the reason I've started this podcast is because I want to talk to guitarists I'm interested in and want to hear their stories. It's for me as much as anyone, but there'll be lots of people who will really be who I know will really enjoy hearing from you and hearing your story and your background and you've touched a lot of people all around the world with your playing, and great to hear you're still creating things and there's more to come.
Yeah, there is definitely more to come. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to publish it all, but that will definitely present itself. I have a strong belief that a good song you can't hold down. So
yeah.
Guitar playing is really, really important. But I mean, even guitar players that are about guitar playing, like melody, like you have Steve Vais and things like that.
Sure.
It's still a song.
Still
They're writing a song.
Yes.
So even though there may not be a lyric with it, the melody and it's just got to speak. It has to be strong. So that's cool. You can't hold those things down. If you've got a good song there, whether it's got lyric or not, they kind of take on a life of their own, and you really can't hold them down. So,
cool.
So I'm hoping that's my expectation anyway.
Yeah, great. Cool. Well, mate, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us.
No worries.
And,
thank you very much, matey.
We'll listen out for your stuff, and we'll have to talk again once you get your record together.
Great.
Thanks for being on the podcast, Dave.
Thanks, matey.
All right, there it is. Part 2 of the interview with David Moyse. And, man, I loved catching up with Dave. Obviously, I guess. He's such an inspiring musician. And on a personal level, I love just catching up and seeing what he's up to now, all the way over in South Australia. You know what I love about our show? We've got some guests who've had some really distinguished and long careers as guitar players, but are still making music, still finding ways to express their creativity on the instrument, which is super cool, super inspiring. Alright, so that's just about it for us here at the Guitar Speak podcast. Now remember, you can listen to all of our past episodes at guitarspeakpodcast.libsyn.com. You can subscribe to us on iTunes. You can listen to us and subscribe on Stitcher. So whatever devices you're using for your podcasting enjoyment, you'll be able to find us somewhere. Hey, if you're enjoying the episodes, please share them around. It really makes a huge difference to us in getting the word out. So yeah, if you can share them on your Facebook or your Instagram or whatever you use, that's awesome. Hey, thanks again for joining me. My name's Matt Wakeling, and we'll see you next time on the Guitar Speak podcast.